much for joining me.
No
Uh,
problem. No problem at all. Thanks for having me, Dara.
no problem. Also, at the time of recording, Jonathan, you're probably very, very happy after Liverpool have just beaten Real Madrid.
I am. I am. It's been a long time coming this season. Obviously, the start wasn't too bad. We were getting wins, but ultimately, the performances were not that good. And, six losses out of seven was something I think none of us envisaged going into this season, having kind of some sort of a period like that. But I think the best thing about the last two results, especially last night, is the performances have been very good. The performances have been very good. The team looks a lot more together. We've defended a lot more kind of resolutely. So it's not even just the results for the last 2 days or the last two games. It's the performances, and it's kind of what we expected. Obviously, not from just last season, but especially with the new signings brought in the summer, and we felt that these are the kind of performances that we should be seeing. And now hopefully now from these last two games we'll see it for the foreseeable, for the rest of the season, because I think we're all very happy from last night, but at the weekend as well.
I'd echo, as my father's an avid Liverpool fan, so I'd echo those sentiments. But particularly nice to see that Slot isn't afraid to go back to that midfield three of Szoboszlai,
Absolutely.
Gravenberch, and McAllister that brought so much success to Liverpool last year. So, Jonathan, I suppose the questions that I have, I'll work through them at your own pace. But the first one I have, because we're just trying to provide context to I suppose, the odd type of job that you have, that basically you get to be a professional football fan. Are you a full-time content creator, or do you have a different job as well that supplements that work?
I was previously part-time bartending. I was previously part-time bartending. I have worked in a lot of pubs and bars before, not just at home, but also in other places as well. I taught English for a few years abroad, so that was really, really cool. I had other jobs like done stores and that back in the day, but I think every Irish lad who maybe doesn't go straight into college after school, would be familiar with that to some degree. But I am now the last kind of year or so, and I'm very lucky to have been, to have built something to be able to do that.
Congratulations, John, because I mean, Jesus, I love it as a, I love it as a full-time job. Can I ask you then,
Thank you.
so, because I do watch your video, like, I mean, I think if you're Irish and you're a football fan, it's nearly impossible to avoid your work. Like, it comes up so constantly. But from what I can make out from following you regularly, so you do a couple of videos that you'll obviously do post-match reactions, and my suspicion is that they're the most successful. But I know you'll kind of do hot takes, combined 11s, and also kind of season predictions. Which of your videos tend to do the best?
Um, I'd say in terms of fast viewing, in terms of kind of uh quick views, like they'd be the post match reactions. I mean, in terms of obviously when Liverpool don't have a good result, obviously I would say those videos do the best, which is how tribalistic football is, how tribalistic sports is. It's only normal. You look at somebody like Mark Goldbridge or somebody like that, these big, big, big content creators. And, he's like somebody like Goldbridge, you'd see clips everywhere, his streamed views and everything across all of his social medias go up tenfold when United have bad results and he's ranting. So it's normal. It is normal. I would say though, I would say, it depends. It depends. Like, I mean, post match reactions can be really good regardless of the result. Obviously the kind of enormity of the game comes into it as well. Obviously, fan base sizes in
Hmm.
Ireland, obviously the likes of United and that, regardless of how that game would go, it'd always do well or whatever. I mean, it's as I said, in terms of post match when we have a bad result, that would probably be the best performing, because as for the reasons I mentioned. Um, but yeah, like I mean, in kind of normal times when Liverpool are as good as we have been the last number of seasons, it can kind of fluctuate. It can kind of fluctuate from from something doing well to something else doing well. Do you know what I mean?
I think that so you're actually kind of hitting on what I would have expected. So for I suppose for people watching along, the context to this video why I wanted to have a chat with you was because myself and Dr. Robbie Butler here at University College Cork have recently had a paper accepted where we analysed and kind of put forward a theoretical model for what are the determinants of post-match consumption of online content for football, because we thought that they were different to live match content. So in live match content, one of the major factors is outcome uncertainty. So if there's a really tight match, like think of, I kind of think of the Klopp team and the Man City team around, 2020, 2019.
Yeah.
Part of what was brilliant about those games was like you were like the perfect antidotes to each other. So like, Pep would kill you by a million passes, but you could press the life out of them. And like, if they did their job better than you or you did their job better than them, then like that's how the match would go. But it made it very unpredictable. But for post-match content like that you do and like the highlights videos that Sky Sports do, outcome is already certain because people know the result. It's already after the match. So we were
Yeah.
thinking that it has to be something else. And you kind of alluded to it there. I think it's kind of fan dynamics. And I'm afraid that you might wince now, but the reason that I got the idea for this paper was I'm an Arsenal fan. And without wanting to dig them out or anything like that, I don't watch AFTV. I don't really like it.
Yeah.
I don't, but to a certain extent, I don't think it's for people like me. So the reason I got the idea for this paper was that when AFTV started, it started in 2012. So Arsenal were obviously in prime banter year. I think that's the 8-2 where United walloped them, and like they're just not kind of going as well. They're dealing with the austerity years from the Emirates. But there's a very famous interview on Talksport between Ray Parlour and Robbie Lyle, who created AFTV, where Ray Parlour basically says like, you're not at all acting in the interest of Arsenal at all, because your videos only do well when you have meltdowns and when things are going bad for Arsenal. And I kind of was wondering, like, God, is there something to that? And I looked at the most popular videos of AFTV. Of the 12 most popular, 9 are post-match reactions, and 8 of the 9 are all losses and heavy
Yeah.
losses. It's like the 5-1s to Bayern Munich are in there. There was it was the 5-1 or the 4-0 thrashing we got at Anfield under Emery. All of those are, and people like Troops and Robbie Lyle and Lee Judges and I suppose Ty as well, and kind of how they react to it is bad. So I suppose in keeping with that, do you ever find yourself leveraging off that, or do you know content creators that do, where like in your post-match reaction video, do you try to, if you're happy, be really happy, or if you're sad, be incredibly sad, and maybe kind of go over
Mhm.
the top in terms of rage bait, stuff like that? Do you leverage off that kind of emotion in your own videos?
To be honest, like it's something like I get asked a lot. I'm a very emotional kind of person. Do you know what I mean? I'm a very emotional kind of person. Like I I think everybody supports their team in kind of certain ways. Like I think, for example, I would be the first to say I can be at the best of times quite reactionary. Do you know what I mean? And I would say
Mm,
that admittedly. But like what you see is what you get with me. I mean, you talk to any of my mates or relations, whatever, who know me since they dot, they would say that what comes across from what say you or anybody else sees online is the person and the fan that I've kind of always been. Um, Obviously, growing up, not seeing Liverpool have much success, or kind of not seeing great Liverpool teams, and uh, like kind of those standards, kind of growing up to obviously what Klopp came in and brought to Liverpool. You know, I suppose like it differs as well on kind of what you become used to, and
mm,
like I suppose my fear was always after obviously Klopp coming in and doing what he did, was kind of falling back to kind of similar standards before Klopp. Obviously, thankfully, Slot has maintained those standards up until the last, like, this bad run of form. But please God, now we're out of that. But yeah, I think it kind of depends what you're used to as well. For example, how good your team should be, or if you're seeing that out on the pitch. And yeah, I mean, as I said, I am emotional. I can say some things that maybe a week later I'd be like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But it's just one of those things, especially like after a game or something like that, or whatever. Like I'd always try to kind of hold myself like to a point. If
Mm.
it's not the end of the world. It's there's still an awful lot to be positive about and stuff like that. And I would try to do that, but it can be tough as well, because I always try to bring across after a game, like literally just what I genuinely think in that moment, and
Mm.
then just do it, and then just put it out. And that's exactly what I think at that moment.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I like that you try and draw a line between like, getting your actual point and your actual analysis across, as well as
Yeah.
kind of tempering it with, because like I would think surely the temptation is there. Is it even there with, rival fans? So say if Arsenal do poorly or Manchester United do poorly. One that I've always wanted to ask you about is like, so say Everton, they represent a really weird fan dynamic, I think, between British and well, actually, it's probably more so Scouts, specifically Liverpool fans
Yeah.
and other Liverpool fans, because I think Arsenal for a few years had this, or Arsenal fans had this with Tottenham, where if you're not actually a local fan, maybe like I would have hated Chelsea a bit more than I would have hated Spurs. Now,
First,
Spurs
yeah.
kind of got up there a bit, so then like you start disliking them as well. But do you ever find, so say with Everton, like I would assume you hate Manchester United more,
Oh yeah.
so, and do you make more content off of that because it's like there's more fans to upset nearly?
To be honest, like, I suppose, like, look, I mean, in terms of anybody that's doing social media or any sort of content creator, whatever kind of area that they're in, there always would be at times, some things that you see would work, and maybe you would touch on them. Do you know what I mean? And
Mm,
and it might be some kind of uh, sentence that you say purposely, knowing that more people would kind of bite or whatever, or something like that. But it's genuinely nothing that I don't believe in that moment. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? It's nothing. Like, I wouldn't say something just for the sake of it and just be like, oh well, do you know what, I'm going to say this even though I don't believe it whatsoever, just because this will do good views and good interactions, and
mm,
bring an awful lot more people to my page. Like, I wouldn't. It'd be always something that I believe in that moment. Whether I think different in a couple of weeks or something like that, whether I'm proven wrong, fair enough, I'll try to hold my hands up. But
mm,
that's what I'm like. In terms of the Everton and United thing, I mean, like, I think my greatest hatred will always be for Manchester United, because I grew up literally as a child just watching them win everything, and us rarely ever having anything over them. So, and even like all my best mates, the vast majority are all United fans, and like we have a kind of level of respect between each other, because they know, like, don't tick me off too badly, or don't push my buttons too badly, especially when Liverpool aren't doing well, even watching a match or whatever, because they know the reaction they will get would not be good. But yeah, I mean, because of those reasons, United will always be. I always want to see United like down there, and us to have the edge on them, because that's what I grew up with.
yeah, I completely agree with that. Even as like an Arsenal fan, like I started supporting them at a very unfortunate time. It was the year they moved to the Emirates, so like literally a year into what would be like an 8-year trophy drive. Like I've never seen them win the league. I've seen them win FA Cups, but like, I've also seen the Europa League final in Baku, and like
Yeah,
the semi-final to
4-1.
Manchester United, like just terrible times. I've never. Hopefully, they might move on past that. But you know what, like Jonathan, I like that you kind of do try to do that, because there's some content creators, particularly British ones, I think, which might be, I don't know, is the infrastructure kind of bigger over there for it digitally, but like in particular, some of the lads on, is it the club? Boovie. Lawrence,
Yeah,
I just think he has made such a successful career out of like so much of his stuff is aimed at like, I don't think he believes a lot of it, but he types
no.
it and it gets people to bite, and that's the way to do it, like.
Yeah, no, he is like he's a good example as well. Like, he's a really really sound guy. I've collabed with him a few times, be on his social medias or mine. He is a really sound guy, and he knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. But yeah, there is certainly that element, and he is somebody who I'd say is a master of kind of that art. And as you say, Dara, a lot of what he said or what he says, I don't think he believes. I mean, say for example, like I mean, I think it was on X like 2 weeks ago or something like that. It's like talking about Liverpool are the worst Premier League champions ever to last night saying Liverpool are back. So do you know what I mean?
It's
Like, and look, as I said, there can always be, like I said previously, that kind of reactionary element to it. But him as a City fan, he definitely does that on purpose. But it works for him, and yeah, he's good at it.
I like that you brought up the X thing because I found specifically with his content, but with other people as well, what medium he's on totally determines how he does. So on if it's just a tweet like on X, or if it's a quick TikTok, I find he's more leaning into the rage baity thing. But if it's like an actual full-length YouTube video that he does, sometimes
Yes.
I'll nearly watch them expecting like, oh, is he going to take a dig at Arsenal here? And it's actually quite measured. So I think there might be a thing as well for what type of content it is. If it's short stuff that gets just thrown around into WhatsApp groups, like, oh, look what he said. Maybe there's more of a tendency to lean into it, and maybe there isn't. But you know what? There are some. I know you collaborate quite a bit with is it George Scaff or he's the
George
Liverpool
Gay,
fan?
yeah,
Scaife, sorry,
yeah,
I mispronounced. But
yeah, George.
I find him quite measured. And I'd say I
He
don't
is.
think I've
He
ever
is.
seen him.
He's much more measured than me. He's much more measured than me. Like, as I said, look, everybody supports their club and their team in different ways, but George would be, I would say, a very different kind of personality to me. That's not saying that either of us would be different in terms of how we're like in person or something like that. But I'm saying, he'd be, I would say, like not that I'm like aggressive or wild or something like that. I mean, I swear anybody you talk to that knows me, I'm not like that. But it just when it comes to Liverpool, when it comes to football, when it comes to sports, I mean, since I've been able to walk, it's always been literally just along with obviously the obvious things, my life. So do you know what I mean? I'm like that, but I would say a lot more kind of calmer when it comes to that individual. George would be, and as you said, Dara, measured and calculated. I'd say, and fair play
And
to him with that.
I think I'd be similar to you in that like I would kind of well I wouldn't say pride myself because it sounds pretentious but yeah I always do try to be like mannerly and like kind of
Yeah,
friendly to people but and my dad has this as well where like if it's Liverpool for him or Arsenal for me like I just have a different set of moral values when I'm watching a match like
yeah.
particularly if it's not going well like I'm just I even struggle to like my mother doesn't really understand football and like she'll me and dad might watch if I'm watching the match with dad like we're watching it together and she's in her chair and she might come in with, "Oh, you'll never believe who's after dying," and like we just have no time for like any kind of conversation at all.
I,
But
I
Jonathan,
swear, I swear, like that's so funny, that's so relatable, Dara, because the amount of times down the years I'd be watching a match with dad, and like don't get me wrong, like I mean, dad's a huge Liverpool fan. He's one of the main reasons that I am who I am in terms of Liverpool. But the amount of times down the years and stuff like that we'd be watching the game, I'd be losing head and everything. Be like, Jonathan, be like, I'm gonna walk out of this room. I'm not gonna watch the game with you. And the amount of times where the head would just be absolutely gone, I'd be effing and blind and whatever. And he'd actually just walk out the room and go in and watch it in another room. Like, I mean, it's just I suppose the maturity side of it as well. He's in his 60s and he's been watching the Reds for 60 years. But no, it's funny. It's funny how relatable that is. Even the Masters this year with Rory, like we'd be massive golf fans as well, play a good bit, and it would be even like say watching that, like say I was on the 72nd hole and I was like, Dad, Rory's gonna miss this, he's gonna miss this. The amount of times throughout the day I was like, oh my god, he's bottling this. I was losing it, and like he had to like walk out of the room and that he was like, and then when the putt missed on the 72nd, he was so quiet. I was like, Dad, I told you. And then it's like, oh, when Rory actually won the playoff, then he was like, now what do you say? Now what do you say? And it's funny because we're both supporting the same thing, but you know what I mean?
I suppose everyone. I think that's kind of part of the joy of football. Like one of the things I think I loved about football or any sport when I got into it is like I think it's most boys' first indoctrination into adulthood. In that, like, I remember, like, so my dad has brought me to 4 Liverpool games when I was a child because he was persistent, like, but it didn't, it didn't click. Arsenal were the one for me. But at that, I remember it was the first. I won't say it, but I swore quite venomously at the ref at one stage, and like my dad said nothing to me.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm allowed to swear, like I'm allowed to lose my cool. And there, I think that's kind of nearly part of it. But on that, so like this is one of the other questions I wanted to ask you because in the paper we were asked to put forward like so we contributed to theory and we contributed to kind of just general academic knowledge, but they were saying like what are the actual like implications of this? So one was obviously we were saying content creators could potentially leverage off negative emotion for more views, but we have a feeling they kind of already do that. But one of the things we were saying is that so I don't know if it's the same in TikTok for Ireland, but I know that British content creators will actually get kind of revenue
They do.
for what they create, but Ireland doesn't have that.
No, no, and we never, we never have. Look, the only revenue Irish creators generate from TikTok is gifting, like on lives, or maybe you can set up a subscription service in which people subscribe to see certain videos and stuff like that. I wouldn't do that because I mean, look, at the same time, I want to be, I want to pay. I don't want to make the people who put me in this place in the first place. I don't want to put them in a position where they have to pay to watch me or something like that. I don't want to
Mhm.
kind of set them back, so I wouldn't never do that. That'd be like putting my match reactions on a subscription service or something. I think that
Mm.
would be sad. But yeah, in terms of live gifting, that's all. So I mean, in terms of the UK, they like I have a lot of mates from there. That's like the highest area my following is from on all my social medias is the UK. Um,
Oh, okay.
it is.
Oh, I'm interested to hear that now because I would have
Yeah,
assumed that like you and Craig on Anfield agenda now, but obviously that like I suppose the two things the island share is that we actually both have a massive interest in English football. But
yeah.
I was thinking that so the British TikTok obviously so they do receive some kind of an incentive scheme for make content and you receive a bit of money. What we were saying in the paper is because there's such a thing of leveraging off negative emotion to drive consumption we were actually saying that there might be like mental health implications for content creators in the sense that like if to maximize consumption on their platform, you have to kind of engage with rage baity topics or topics that are emotionally sensitive to people. Like, and I've anecdotally scrolled through some of the comments that you receive, and even there was, I could be mistaken this, but I think Rory Talks Football, who's a British content creator, does stuff on Arsenal. He even received like kind of I think kind of DMs telling him to kind of kill
Oh God,
himself. Like
yeah.
it's so just from that perspective, like have you ever had like insanely over the top reactions from like kind of fans of your channel that would negatively impact your mental health?
Um, I don't think it's ever affected me. I don't think it's ever affected me because at the end of the day, they're just words on a screen, and I always
Mm,
kind of tell myself that those kind of messages or those kind of comments or whatever say so much more about that person's situation than mine. I would never do that to anybody, be it on online or obviously in person. Do you know what I mean? I think
mm,
if somebody was that much filled with hate, then obviously they're not too happy with their own situation. So that's what I always say. Obviously at the start, I mean, a few years ago, like you kind of be like, wow, you kind of be taken aback by it, like, but not affected. You'd be kind of like,
mm,
okay, and then eventually, like, I mean, the more you see of it, like it's just water off a duck's back. It really is. I mean, I'd say I have a thick skin anyway. Like, and as I said, I don't think it's ever affected me, but absolutely now it's just a case of that. Even if I see it in comments or obviously DMs or whatever, people saying horrible, horrible things to you, they don't literally know anything about you other
mm.
than your opinions on football. So it's incredibly, incredibly strange behavior. There's a block button. If you're on Instagram, it's the same thing. You can restrict people, which is even better, that they don't know that they're basically blocked. So they'll keep commenting like their comments are going to show
Okay.
up when they never are. So yeah, like I mean, after a few years, you kind of get to that, and you come to the stage where if somebody is that bad, that horrible, it's just don't even ignore them. Just block them.
Mm.
I don't want to talk to you about football or anything. I like it's as simple as that. You're not worth me time. So yeah, simple as that.
Exactly. I think that's quite a good self-regulation policy for it. That kind of brings us on to, so this was actually asked by one of my friends, Richard Swanton, if he's watching it, but he's a massive Liverpool fan. But so we were having this conversation a few weeks ago where we were talking about which fan base is the worst. And we were kind of coming to like the City one isn't that bad because like there's no fans. And I was saying I actually think all fans are as bad as each other. It's just that there's two factors that determine it. One is how many fans are there, because that's how exposed you are to them. The other is, are they doing well or are they doing poorly? So I think Arsenal in the last few years have gotten a reputation. They've always had somewhat of a reputation for
Yeah.
it, but the fan base, even more so, has become kind of by other people's standards like absolutely insufferable. But I think that's a combination of like they're doing, I know obviously it's not been associated with many trophies yet, but they're doing really well in terms of performance. And in addition to that, I think unlike maybe Chelsea or Man City or Spurs, Arsenal do actually, it's obviously not on the same level as Manchester United and Liverpool, but they do actually have like a really large fan base
Mm.
internationally. So Richard basically wanted to ask you on your opinion of which fan base do you actually think is the worst, or have you noticed that is there ones that are particularly bad, or do you think it's much of a muchness?
I think I think to be honest, I as you said there, Dara, I think it depends. It does depend kind of on the time.
Mm,
Whereas, like say for example, Arsenal, like you touched on there years ago, um, yeah, everybody kind of enjoyed laughing at them and having the banter and seeing them in tears every week and just taking the mick. Whereas now, granted, they don't have anything per se to
mm.
celebrate yet. They are a lot better. They're a really good football team and they're competitive year on year. I would say with Arsenal fans, the biggest thing is that I'm not sure a lot of them know how to act in this position. That's what I would say. That's what I
That's
would
a
say.
good
And I think
point.
I think they're very, very, very over the top. I would say in general over my lifetime, and look, that's probably being a Liverpool fan and being 28 and witness what I have, like I said earlier to you, is probably Manchester United, in terms of how entitled they are. I mean, even how bad they've been the last 12 years, but they feel or they come across so entitled. So I would
Mm.
say that, but I would say in recent years, like Arsenal in terms of their online fan base to a large degree. To a large degree. Now I have loads of friends, loads of Arsenal friends, and I could watch any game with them, and we could have the banter back and forth. They're grand. I find Arsenal fans in person are actually fine. They're good people. They're similar to Liverpool fans in a way. It's just there is
Mm.
that online kind of part of it. And I feel like it's grown over the last number of years. I feel like it's a majority. And going back to that point, I'm not sure they know how to deal with actually being in this position that they're in.
Do you know that's an interesting one because I always so the reason I supported Arsenal was I just had this weird thing where the road I grew up on, there was none of the dads of the other boys that I was friends with were into soccer, so they all just got to pick their own team. So at the time, they just picked whoever was successful, Manchester United, Chelsea. Dad told me that his dad was a Manchester United fan and he picked Liverpool. Now, it transpired that my granddad wasn't actually into football at all, and it was my dad got into football and he started supporting Liverpool. So my granddad, to kind of take the piss out of him, was like, "Oh, I support United," like kind of or whatever. So, but I kind of then thought because like, oh well, none of my friends follow their dad's team or have a team, and dad didn't follow his dad's team. So I thought you got to pick. So I was like, well,
Yes.
I didn't know it fully, but I was kind of old enough to know that I don't think Chelsea are the nicest. And
No.
dad, there was no way it could have been United. Like there was, I knew it didn't have to be Liverpool, but there was no way it could be United. So then I was like, well, Arsenal are back then. It just used to be the big four. So I was like, well, I'll just pick Arsenal. And that arbitrary decision has been there. But I've always thought that because I think for one, obviously my dad's a Liverpool fan, so I have a soft spot for them. But when I was growing up, the dynamic between Liverpool and Arsenal. So I grew
Mm.
up I was born in the late 90s. So like it would have been like kind of Wegener's era, and kind of Liverpool would have been outside their kind of the boot room and that success that they would have had in kind of the 80s and the early 90s and stuff. But I nearly thought that, but when you said there that there's nearly a similarity between them, I always kind of felt that there was nearly a thing of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because like when I
Yeah.
was growing up, Dad actually quite liked Arsenal, but obviously it was because like the odd year they might keep a title away from United. So if they were beating United, well then that was a good thing. And when Liverpool got really good under Klopp, even though Arsenal were like in dire straits, I had no jealousy at all. I was like, I'm delighted that like there's like I'm delighted that they're beating United in their banter era, and that like they're keeping Jose Mourinho away from kind of like doing stuff. But now that they're competitively approximate to each other for the first time in my lifetime, the tension between me and my Liverpool friends now has never been higher. Me and Dad still haven't kind of there's an unspoken issue, I think, in the house where like we both like even like during the like last year when like Arsenal just were not able to keep up at all. Dad was kind of like going like, no, I'd prefer now to be in your position, Chase. And I was like, oh, go away. Like
Yeah.
there's no way you'd prefer that.
No.
But I kind of thought so. I suppose there is a thing that the dynamics are probably there's traditional rivalries there, which you'll never get over, but there's probably also who's winning the most at a certain point in time and how big are the fan base. So on that, Jonathan, the last question I have for you really is just who's going to win?
Who's going to win the league?
Yeah, well, league and Champions League, if you have any ideas about them.
Do you know what? I'll like I have said this the last few weeks. I think if Liverpool can continue what we've done over these last two games, if we can go to City on Sunday and win, which I think we can do,
Mm,
especially if we played like we have the last two games, defensively, like we know we can be like over the last number of years with Liverpool, but especially even since Block came in last season. Yeah, a couple of games here and there, you'll have your defensive mishaps, but solid defensively, like we've been the last two games. We can deal with Haaland. I think we can go to City and win. I do. Like we were very comfortable last season. I think City are better this season only purely because of Haaland, and they're completely reliant on him. If we can do that, if we can keep the pressure up on Arsenal, keep playing like this, I think we can play our way back into the title race. For now, I
mm.
am going to say Arsenal will win the league. For now, I'm going to say Arsenal will win the league.
I kind of like I'd agree like from an Arsenal fan perspective, I think there's always you want to put pressure away from yourself and on other people, but I do think Arsenal probably should be the favourites. My there's a few matches coming up for Arsenal, and I was looking at I don't know if you got to see their Champions League match last night, but Moreno had to start up front again because Jesus, Havertz, and Gyökeres are all injured, and
Yeah,
Madueke and Martinelli are also injured. So I was kind of going like, okay, if there's like if Saka or Eze get injured, that's kind of it. And there's a run of games coming up now for Arsenal. Similarly to maybe like Liverpool have gotten through kind of a tough run of fixtures. I think Arsenal's next fixtures include
Chelsea,
so
Spurs, and
Sunderland
Brighton. I
away,
think
which is a tough
Sunderland
one.
away.
Then you've got Bayern Munich, you've got the North London Derby against Spurs, and
You
then you've
got
got Chelsea, and I
Chelsea
think they have
and
to go to Villa
Brighton as
Park
well.
as
I
well.
think as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
So
look, I
like I
think
think if they weather that, maybe they can get through it. But
100%.
it's just I think the other thing, and you kind of alluded to it, we don't know what it looks like for Arsenal to put together that run and then
Yes.
like just keep doing it. It's always been either they started really well and then something happens, or something's happened that they haven't started well and they finish well, but it's just too late at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And look, to be fair, of the of the fixtures mentioned, you mentioned there, Dara, and when I was told them, there was one of my viewers on a stream there. I think it was at the weekend watching Liverpool and Villa. I was kind of saying, well, look, Arsenal are good enough to beat all of them. Um, Now, Bayern Munich, I would say, are maybe, along with Arsenal, the best team in the world at the moment. So I think that's a 50-50 game. But apart from that, Arsenal are good enough to beat all of them. Whether Arsenal are good enough to beat Bayern Munich, it remains to be seen. But they're in a good position in the Champions League anyway. But yeah, I think the biggest thing with Arsenal is that when there's been pressure put on over recent years, they have faltered. So if Liverpool can do that, obviously if Manchester City can do that, then it will be interesting to see how Arteta and the squad react to it. I think this is definitely their best squad. They made great signings in the summer, And I think from the position they're in, I know it's early, but I think they should win the league. They're definitely favourites. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. It's funny the point you said back there or previously. I actually always kind of admired Arsenal up until recent years. Do you know what I mean? But like that just goes back to obviously, as you said, being competitive approximates. Do you know what I mean? That just goes back to that point. Say for example, I always liked Newcastle, but then how so many of their fans acted in the summer, I was like, I'm not sure what I think about Newcastle anymore. Do you know that kind of way? So
I actually no, I completely agree because Newcastle are one that like I've never seen a team that I think when they got taken over because it was just in the middle of like the City dominance, people were like, well, do you know what? Fair enough that there's
yeah,
another team are able to go get it and like they can upset the apple cart. And within about 6 months, everyone hated them. Like they're
I
just and
know.
now they've assembled a team of like bastards like Bruno
Yeah.
Guimaraes and all that. Like they just like
Joe
oh I can't.
Linton.
And I know Arsenal are no like pussycats or whatever, but Jesus, like the other one that I found interesting about that you mentioned that was that I remember growing up. So as I said, I was born in the late 90s. I'm 29 now. I was born in 96. So when I grew up, people would be like, Spurs. And you're like, who are Spurs? Like, do you know what I mean? They weren't really a thing.
No.
And I was like, Chelsea are the ones that, like, I hated Jose Mourinho and I hated Didier Drogba and I hated Michael Essien because they ruined and I hated John Terry for a series of reasons. But they
Yeah.
were, do you know what I mean? They were the ones I hated. But and I actually remember when Harry Redknapp he got top four at one stage with like that team that had like I think it had Bale, it had Modric, Crouch was in it I think as well, and I
Crouch,
was
yeah.
kind of yeah, and
Crouch,
it was the first year in ages that they got Champions League, and I wasn't happy for them, but I was like, do you know what? That's no harm to mix it up like or whatever. And it was then there was like a 7 year stint where Spurs finished above Arsenal, and that was the first time I'd ever been exposed to the rivalry because I'm
yes,
obviously not a local. And I was going like, oh, I really hate them. Oh,
yeah,
but it was solely because they were competitively approximate to Arsenal. There was
that's
no
it.
other and I think that's happened with because I could be wrong, but it was Paddy Murphy actually, who I know you've worked with him previously. Paddy Murphy did a TikTok about I think it must have been 3 seasons ago, just after Arsenal's Amazon documentary. And obviously, that season was the first season Arsenal went on to challenge for the league. Obviously, they fell well short. But Liverpool kind of had a bit of a transition year under Klopp, and they didn't get back challenging until the next year. But I remember Paddy Murphy put up a post at the start of the year when Arsenal had won maybe like say 4 games, and he said maybe I'd have a bit of a soft spot for Arsenal winning the league after the documentary. And within like 3 weeks, he hated them. But it's just about if
It
they're a
is.
threat or not.
It is. It is. And it's the same. It's the same in everything. I mean, the amount of sports I'm such an avid fan in, it's the same. I mean, all of a sudden you kind of think of somebody or some teams like, oh, they're no threat, and then they become a threat, and then by virtue of that, their fans get a lot louder because they actually have something to back it up with.
Mm.
And do you know what I mean? As you said, I mean, they're actually at a point where all of a sudden you're like, wow, these guys are competitive than us. These guys might even be better than us.
Mm.
And obviously, I think it's just human nature from that point that you're kind of like, well, I mean, I don't really like these guys anymore. I don't really like them anymore. Do you know what I mean?
I think we have a similar thing down here in Cork with the hurling. That I remember when Limerick won their first All Ireland in, I think, since like the 70s or the 80s. Similar kind of like, good for them. It's nice not to
Yeah,
see Kilkenny win it or something like that. And then like they go and win all the ones that they win, you're going, Jesus, now there was other reasons in the Limerick hurling team that maybe you would dislike them, but it was the same thing, it's just competitive kind of
yeah.
proximity. But Jonathan, listen, thank you so much for talking, and I think you gave like lovely stuff that kind of echoes to the findings that we have in the paper. But thanks a million for talking to me.
Thanks very much, Dara. I enjoyed the chat. And by the way, the last thing I'll leave you with, you asked me about the Champions League. Liverpool will win the Champions League.
Do you know what? No, I would because I think as an Arsenal fan who just continuously shows up to get bitch slapped in the Champions League for my own thing, I think the reason Real Madrid are so successful in the Champions League is I think it's more about firepower than like how good you are. Like you obviously have to be structurally a good team, but I think there's a thing with like Real Madrid the year. Do you remember the year they knocked out City, and even the year they won it in the final against you? You can have all the tactics and set up, and we created more XG, we'll create more chances. If Bale can just bicycle kick it in from like a chance that has 0.04 XG, that it doesn't matter. It transcends tax. So I think with Liverpool, if Isaac kicks on, Wirtz gets going a bit more, and you have Ekitike, you have Salah, I find it very hard to look past just for the amount of goals you can get out of nowhere. I think
100%, 100%, and like you've seen it with Klopp down the years. I mean, over two legs, European nights, obviously Anfield. You look at last night when Liverpool, especially have a good team. It's just so difficult to actually beat us. So yeah, I kind of think Arsenal might win the league, and I have especially after last night, sneaky feeling we'll do the Champions League number 7.
Jonathan, I think we both settle for that.
Fair. Thanks, Dara.